I do get that some of these things, like Mises had a good. I'm not going to be able to do it justice, but he was talking about that some people were like critics of capitalism, and this is Mises writing like in the 40s, and the critics of capitalism were lamenting like the Industrial Revolution and how there was a virtue like the people like the farmland, when you were on the homestead, and there was a virtue in that and the civic responsibility, and now everyone's just a cog in the machine going into the factories. And Mises said, okay, but with the rise of agriculture, that was a change too. And he said before that, people were hunter-gatherers, and you could have talked about, and he said there were poets and whatnot lamenting, oh, now we don't have the thrill of the hunt and going again. Now we're just sitting around waiting for stuff to come up out of the ground because we water it. Like, what kind of lazy, sedentary people do that? Agriculture is boring, right?
Welcome to the Benson Wealth Podcast. I take complex financial and economic topics and make it accessible to the everyday listener. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Benson Wealth Podcast. My name is Drew Benson. I am the president and founder of Benson Wealth Management and a senior wealth advisor with Raymond James. I'm also the co-managing partner for True North Wealth Management Group, which is a platform for independent wealth advisors. By the way, if you're out there and you are at one of the big investment firms, and if you've always dreamed about how to become an independent advisor, we have greater flexibility and freedom. Give us a look because we may be a great fit for you. One of the nice things about what we've done is we've created a blueprint to help you move from the old firm to the new firm and do it successfully and have great success on the other side. But for a lot of people, it's very scary to make the jump. And so we've created a system to help you have as much success as humanly possible. The other downside, though, or one downside I would say to the independent space, is that you can be quite lonely and you can be on an island. We've created a great network of advisors at True North where there's camaraderie and idea sharing. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, the backing of a firm, but you're also getting the independence and flexibility of being an independent advisor. So again, if you're interested, please reach out to us at True North Wealth Management Group. Today, I had the great fortune of interviewing Bob Murphy again. So, many of you probably already know who Bob is. He has quite a great following. Bob is the chief economist for Infineo. And Bob is a former academic, has a PhD in economics from NYU, and he runs 3 different podcasts. So Bob is a dynamic thinker. He's become a friend of mine. He actually doesn't live too far from me here. He's up the street in Massachusetts. I'm in New Hampshire. So I've enjoyed getting to know Bob on the side, and then we just had a really dynamic conversation. I did make an executive decision to go ahead and split this episode up in 2 because we really got deep into the weeds with stablecoins today and with the passage of new legislation. So this first part, you're going to hear about stablecoins and about the Genius Act that was recently passed by the Trump administration. And in the second part of the interview, you're also going to hear, which will come out a week later, you're going to hear about his thoughts on AI. Okay, so this is the second part of the interview with Bob. So Bob and I really get into what does AI mean for the future. And we spent a lot of time unpacking, and Bob does a great job of unpacking what the potential economic benefits are from AI. And he gets into some specifics that I think will enlighten you and surprise you. But we also get into even a little bit of a philosophical discussion on what does this mean from a social standpoint in terms of society. So again, we're going to talk about AI today, what it means for the broader economy, and what it could do in terms of worker productivity, and also what it could mean in terms of GDP growth over time. So I hope you enjoy as much as I did. Okay, let's talk about AI. Truly, we're going to talk about AI, Bob.
Okay.
Because I just really want your opinion on all this. So obviously, there's a lot of innovation happening, and AI is taking the economy by storm. And I'm seeing it make pretty large changes, even to my own sort of old school industry of finance. And I think I see this potentially as a major disruptor. And one has to wonder, and of course, we don't know the future. But one has to wonder, are we going through a type of industrial revolution of sorts? Is this the 90s again with the internet revolution? And is this going to be a major boost to worker productivity? I interviewed an economist. By the time this is posted, this will be a couple episodes ago, with an economist, Matt Orton, who is basically the chief strategist for Raymond James Investment Management. So there's an asset management wing. And he described AI as like an exoskeleton in terms of worker productivity. And so I guess my question to you is, do you see this as providing significant advantages to worker productivity? And then furthermore, could this be another sort of significant wave of economic growth, maybe the way the steam engine was in the 1800s or the automobile in the early, 1900s, or the internet, right, at the late 1900s? Like, is this another big moment in history? And then what do you think this does overall to worker productivity?
So yes, I do. And because what you can do with these, just focusing narrowly on the large language models, the LLMs, things like ChatGPT and Claude and stuff like that, if people haven't had conversations with them, and I use that term quite consciously, like, I don't mean ask it a one-off question and then see what the answer is, and they go, oh yeah, whether it's good or bad or something, or give it some kind of brain teaser, and they say, oh look, I got that wrong. What an idiot! This is stupid.
Yep.
I'm saying have a serious, high-level conversation, and not where you're talking down to it. No, talk to it as if you were talking to a cosmopolitan, well-read human who was very fluent in your tongue, because it's not just English. These things are, and just go back and forth with the thing. And I think you would be amazed at just the depth of the conversation you can have. And it might say some wrong things, but then you can point that out and then it'll correct itself. Just like if you're talking to a human, it's not that humans are infallible. They might say wrong things. And then what do? You just point it out. And just because I've done it like in my own, with, the work I do at Infineo, there have been certain projects where, I had to, for example, I was doing something with, trying to show how if you had a pool of life insurance policies, when the cash flows came out of them based on mortality events, that like the band of predictability would be higher than if you just had one policy. I was trying to quantify that.
Interesting.
And to do it analytically, like to do it precisely, is really hard. If you have a bunch of policies, like the math, it gets tricky. And so instead, I just wanted to simulate. I just wanted to say, like, let me just do a computer simulation. These to give the computer the probabilities of mortality for each policy. And then say we got a pool of 100 policies. How do we know over time? And so it's like, oh, why don't we just do that and run the simulation 100,000 times and then just tell me the averages? So that's something like you can use code, but I'm not a programmer. And so I talked to it was Claude I happened to be using, explained what I was doing, and it wrote the code and did it and presented the nice result. And I checked it. Like I did it in Excel, like, the case of a smaller number there where I could do it quote by hand just to make sure and it was, matching my results to the second decimal place. So I was like, yep, I think it's doing the right thing here. And I'm just saying, and going back and forth. And so that's something where, I could have gotten some programmer to do it and it wouldn't have taken it, but it would have taken me the time it would have taken me just to explain what I wanted to that other programmer. Claude already did it, and then I tweaked the results. No, actually I didn't want that. I wanted this, and it's just revising the Python code in real time as we're sitting there talking, and just keeps rerunning it. So I'm just saying that's just one example, and I've had plenty of projects like that where it's not so much that it's going to get rid of my job. It's not even that it's stuff that I used to do that now gets automated. It's like a combination of things I would have done now take less time, but also I'm able to do a lot more. Like before, I would have just been able to do the report with the small number of cases that I could have done myself, like in Excel, and just checking it by hand. Whereas here, I could do the broader case. So what I think is happening and will continue to happen is more and more companies will have to sit down and they need to first realize what can these things do and what can't they do, and then figure out, can we redesign our workflow to incorporate that? Because there's a sense in which it's like for certain tasks, you have workers that they're like telecommuting workers. You know what I mean? So companies that might have workers who just deliver all their product over the internet to you, whether email or give you some kind of results or whatever, quantitative analysis. So just picture it like that, and then they have a decent IQ, and there are experts in certain key areas. That's the thing too. Like I was going back and forth with Claude on another issue about like Gödel's incompleteness theorems and weird. I mean, so they have a lot of deep expertise in various fields too, and they can speak in English. That's the critical thing is you can remarkable. Ask it, and it knows what you're trying. It quote gets the spirit of your question, which is amazing. So I'm saying as firms figure out how to do that, it's like having millions of workers like that just got added to the labor force that have those skills, and they will work for like $3 an hour when you run the math. And so you're saying that's not going to boost total productivity. That's
Has to.
right. So that's kind of how I picture it. It's not that they're going to wipe out jobs. I think a better analogy is like using tractors in agriculture. You still need farmers. You just don't need as many people in agriculture. You can produce more and better food with fewer workers because they're using tractors. I think it's the same thing here, that you will need fewer people to be accountants, but you still will have humans who are accountants, but just now they'll have way more clients and be able to give much more sophisticated reports to them and keep track of stuff that before wouldn't have been worth it because now they're going to be aided by LLMs and whatnot.
Well, I think even particularly in my space where you still need a lot of administrative or secretarial work, and I'm starting to use an AI tool with note-taking. It's amazing. I mean, hours and hours and hours. And this is, I think, like a simple use case with AI. Obviously, you're talking about a lot more complex use cases for AI. But even in the simple stuff, for someone like me or a doctor or an attorney that does a lot of client consultations and has to maintain very meticulous notes, one is it's completely taking back tons of time for me. So hours and hours of time, hundreds of hours a year, conceivably. That's also stuff that I got so bogged down, I'd have staff sit in on meetings and take those notes. And that's honestly, frankly, a poor use of their time.
Yep.
They should be engaging in the business of advising or just doing more sophisticated administrative work for me. But then on top of it, my notes are a lot more in-depth and complete, which protects me from a regulatory standpoint. Mm-hmm. It helps me recall information when we're talking to clients in the future. And it's even creating CRM items for clients. And it's creating follow-up emails of like, hey, we spoke about this today. Here's a reminder. I promised that I was going to do this for you. And so it also reduces potential friction with a client when they're like, I thought you said you were going to do this. And it's like, well, here's the transcript, here's the notes. This is exactly what we talked about. Oh, and did you see the follow-up email that I sent you? And so that type of, and I think, Bob, this is the simple side of AI, right? And I'm seeing dramatic changes. I've started to use it a little bit too for research in terms of comparing asset classes. And it's amazing. And you have to train it a little bit and work on it a bit. But it is remarkable to me how much information I can gather about price movements of asset classes and correlations between them that it would have taken a quant. I would have needed some kid down at MIT who was working on his PhD to run this stuff for me, and I was able to generate just some basic conceptual ideas to help me get my head around how do certain asset classes move with one another. And that information just comes so quickly, and I don't fully trust it yet. But as you start to work with it, and to your point, you can correct it. You can say, well, that S&P data, like, where are you getting that source? And then you can give it the proper source. And then it's like, oh, okay, now that data is more in line and it's starting to come together. I can see a clear, more accurate picture here. This is going to change every industry. I have a close friend who, by the way, is a huge fan of yours, who said that AI is not coming for your job, but people who use AI are coming for your job. How do you feel about that statement?
Oh, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Right, one CPA armed with LLMs could put out 50 CPAs who aren't using it. So that's definitely that's definitely true. Just a couple of follow-ups to what you're saying. You're right. The thing is, people say, "Oh, so you're saying, Murphy, like that as GPT-9 comes out eventually, we're going." And I'm saying, no, if they just came to a screeching halt, and if those LLMs could do nothing more than what they can do right now, I am saying eventually, as businesses figured out how to incorporate those and change their workflows, what I mean? It's like when they came with an assembly line, like you had to change the way you were making the cars.
Well, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Like, that took years to implement.
Right. So I'm saying that, this stuff here, like even if they just came to a screeching halt and they could just stay at their current level of sophistication, that yes, that would in the long run have a huge impact on average human productivity. But of course, they keep pushing the boundaries on those things. And then, the two issues that I see are the one that you said with the it's called hallucination. That they will just say things with confidence, and that is the one. And I even one time had a conversation. I think it was GPT-4 about that, and said, can you? Because I caught him. I was talking to him about Dr. Strangelove or something. And it got the character wrong. And it was confidently telling me that off the top of my head, I can't remember which it was, But they were telling me that one, like it was the Texan guy or something saying something when it meant it was the other one. And I pointed that out to it. And I said, I think you're confused that the dialogue you're tripping was actually this character, right? And it went, oh, yes, I'm sorry. And I said, if I hadn't known that, we wouldn't have discovered that. And so, is there any way that you could have told me the degree of confidence? And it said something like, no, the way I work, I don't really have degrees of confidence the way humans do. It's just that's my algorithms told me that was the right string of letters to put out, and that's what I did.
Too funny.
So it was kind of interesting that there was no way. It said, if you want, for all my future answers, I can give a disclaimer and say you should go. And I said, yeah, but if you say that for everything, then that doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like it.
Well, and I ran into that and I'm not using AI to generate portfolios at all yet. And I don't even know if that's approved for use anyway, but just wanting to test like concepts. And it was totally hallucinating about S&P data. I was like, where's this even coming from? And so you kind of have to your point, you have to coach it. It's just like, I don't know what it was pulling. I don't know where it came from or how it came up with it, but it came up with something. And it was wildly inaccurate.
And the other, I don't know if you.
And I don't even know if that's considered hallucination, but it just created something.
Yeah, I mean that's the term people use is that it will just confidently like stuff too. Like, hey, give me a list of 10 famous authors that have written on this subject or something. I'm doing a term paper. Kids cheating and using. And sometimes they'll give it and the kids will put it in their thing. And that's one way that the teachers catch them cheating
right.
is they'll have citations to books that just don't exist. Like the AI just made it.
Yeah, so, literally made up books. I've seen that. Yeah.
And so you're like, I think, people have this idea that, the computer is going and doing stuff I would have done. It just does it faster. And it's like, no, the way they're generating those results, it's on the one hand, it's fascinating that it's doing it. But on the other hand, it's scary when you realize that, no, there's in a sense nothing under the hood. It's not like there's this little guy behind the keyboard that's thinking about your question. It's just that no, this is what the algorithm says is the best combination of letters to put in response to what you typed in, and it doesn't mean anything to the computer in some metaphysical sense. The other thing too that I noticed that is a problem that they will have to figure out a fix for, and I don't know if you've encountered this, is like I'll say a lot of it is something that I can do piecemeal, but I'll have a lot of data that needs crunch, and so I'll have a conversation for a few minutes to get Claude or whatever to know this is what I'm working on, this is what I want. Okay, yeah, and then here's an Excel file I'll upload to you that's got 1,000 entries. Do it, and it'll do like the first 50. And they go, there you go, and I'll say, wait a minute, but how can that be? And I said, yeah, I just did the first 50 to show you what it looks like. And I'll say, yeah, but I wanted you to do it, and like I'll have to like plead with
this. It's like having an actual employee.
Right.
Like, no. I told you we're going to organize all 100 files, not and the so first 5.
And it almost like it doesn't volunteer that here I did the first 50. It acts as if it did what you asked, and it's only by looking at it they say, wait a minute, you only did 50 of them. And it's like, well, yeah.
So what you told me to do.
I just showed you how to do it. You can do the rest. And so so I asked, here at Infineo, with like Christian Hubbs has got a PhD in machine learning from Carnegie Mellon. Like he's our AI guy. And I asked him about that, and he said he thinks where that comes from is because remember, they just scour the internet and just look at all sorts of stuff that's on the internet. That's how they train them to get their like worldview and to know how things work. And he said, yeah, that's because most of the things you'll see online to explain some concept, whether it's from a textbook or a tutorial, video, whatever, is someone will like show the concept to the viewer or the reader and then just follow the pattern. It's not that in a math textbook, it will go through all 1,000. It will just show you the principle. So that's what they think. Oh, when a human asks you to do something, that's what a good answer looks like, is you show them this is how you would do it. Now you go do the rest. I just showed you how. And so, you know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't think it's being lazy. It just thinks that's what I've been trained to think a good answer looks like.
That's exactly right. You've touched on it slightly, but there's a lot of concern that a lot of people are going to get displaced. And maybe there's some level of Schumpeterian creative destruction that occurs. But do you think this is going to lead to significant job losses and replacement? Or do you think they will find newer, better, more sophisticated jobs? What do you think the implications are?
All right. So in a laissez-faire free market, world, there would be a lot of displacement, but yeah, ultimately I think it's boosting human productivity. Like everyone can do so much more with this stuff. It would be like looking at the world of the Jetsons and saying, oh no, like George isn't allowed to drive anymore. Now he has to fly around in his car and look at it. And it's like, no, that's what it would look like when the robots and the machines are doing most things. It's that, yeah, you're sitting there pushing some buttons and stuff is happening. And in a sense, it's like, look at all the work and jobs that the machines took from the Jetsons family. But that's also equivalent to having a really high standard of living, that you have to, quote, work 1 hour a day and live at, like kings compared to us today, right? So that's what progress looks like in the grand scheme. So I would say that. Having said all that, though, I do think that you're seeing a bunch of different forces coming together. Like there's this big push for UBI, universal basic income, and things like that. And so I am concerned that there's the various, powerful players involved on the world stage might be, they're doing things that they're trying to get us to a place where it is hard because of government regulations and other factors for the public to go get conventional job. It's like, once you get displaced because, AI took your job, here, just get on the government dole and we'll pay you. And so just to transition, so to get people just to think, like, I just put in my virtual reality headset. I live in an 8x8 cubicle in some high-rise apartment. Nobody owns homes anymore. And I just get plugged into that and I just live off of that stuff.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy too. It's like, well, they don't want this to happen to society, but then they're going to create a set of, incentives where they actually force people, or highly incentive. I shouldn't say force, but they incentivize people to then go on, the universal basic income, and then they don't go and get a job. And it's like the thing that maybe they're worried about. They're literally behind the scenes actually pushing and creating. I guess that's the unintended consequence of it. So you do have some concerns, obviously. Do you? One of my bigger concerns is less economic. Like not to get overly philosophical, I'm actually really excited. I think this could lead to a significant wave of economic growth, which I think our country and the global economy needs. And I think it could not fully solve, but partially solve some debt crises issues. I think it could give us a boost in economic output. There's a lot to be excited about when I put on my economist hat. When I put on my father hat, right? Or I look at friends and kids that are being raised in this, like I had to learn how to write. I had to learn how to write a persuasive article. I had to learn how to use good grammar, use punctuations. My concern is, are certain basic human skills going to get lost in the shuffle? And will there be some trade-offs, some societal costs with the machines doing so much more work that, frankly, we used to be able to do ourselves, and maybe we should have some knowledge for?
So there's certainly going to be trade-offs. I've just noticed this, and it's partly, I guess, just as you become a crotchety old man, this is how you do it. But I'm not doing it to trip the kids up. But when I go through like a drive-through or something, and I'm getting a coffee at Starbucks, and then it is whatever it is, and then I pay, and and I have some shit, like, and I want to,
yeah,
I give more, but I don't want to have them give me 62 cents back, and so I give them more. It's just amazing how much they don't get what I'm doing. And one time it was like the bill was $17 or something, and I gave them 20 and plus some stuff to get a 5 back, and the kid looked at it and he gave me the food and then gave me my 20 back or something. Like he just didn't and I went, no, you need to take my payment, And so anyway,
so he was hallucinating like AI hallucinates.
Yeah. And I know, because he typed it in, you know what I mean? Like he had the wherewithal to realize, well, I'm just let the computer do it. But when he looked at the thing, he looked at the wrong number. He must have looked like amount tendered and said 20, so he gave me it instead of giving me the change.
But I declined in just the other day. It was actually 2 days ago, and he was saying that he was at Market Basket, which you probably have Market Basket down in Mass. He was at Market Basket, and which is a grocery store up in New England, and he did the same thing. He gave the cashier money, and he's like, "Hey, here's here's money, here's some change," because he wanted even dollars back. So you give the exact change that's on it, and he said, "Do you know what I'm doing right now?" And the kid was like, "I'm really confused." And then he's like, "You should talk to your manager about how to do change." I think he was just, this is kind of alarming. Like there's some basic tasks that like that's just second nature. We all knew how to manage cash as kids, but they don't at all anymore.
Yeah.
And is that a problem is the question, Bob.
Right. So definitely that's happening. But then, when I periodically post this stuff on social media, some people would come back and make fun of me and say, nobody's going to be using cash in 5 years. Like, it's just you and your boom. Like, they think I'm a boomer, even though I look like one. I play one on TV, but I'm actually not.
You're Gen X, right?
Because another one I complained about, too, is I was in a Walmart one time, and this kid was walking by, an employee, he's got the uniform on. He's walking by me, And I said, hey, I forget what I was looking for. Is such and such, would that be in aisle 17? And he said, yeah, probably. And he just kept walking. And he wasn't rude. It was just, I asked him, and then he did catch himself and then came back and said, do you want me to go check? But I mean, it was just, that was his natural inclination. And so I joked about that. And then people were saying, yeah, because we just use our phones. You can go just look on your phone right now and it'll tell you where in the store. Why would you ask someone? That's stupid.
Why don't you just order it while you're standing in the aisle and then just pick it up front,
right,
not even use a cashier?
Yeah, drone will bring it to your house. Yeah. What are you doing, old man?
So I know there's AI Bob at Infineo, but when we talk like this, you will officially be Boomer Bob. So this is Boomer Bob now.
Yeah. So all that is to say that I do get that some of these things, like Mises had a good, I'm not going to be able to do it justice, but he was talking about that some people were like critics of capitalism. And this is Mises writing like in the 40s. And the critics of capitalism were lamenting like the Industrial Revolution and how, there was a virtue like the people like the farmland, when you were on the homestead, and there was a virtue in that and the civic responsibility. And now everyone's just a cog in the machine going into the factories. And Mises said, okay, but with the rise of agriculture, that was a change too. And he said before that, people were hunter-gatherers, and you could have talked about, and he said there were poets and whatnot lamenting, oh, now we don't have the thrill of the hunt and going again. Now we're just sitting around waiting for stuff to come up out of the ground because we water it. Like what kind of lazy, sedentary people do that? Agriculture is boring. Right, and not manly, and So his point was just stuff changed. So I think it's a similar kind of thing here, where if we are moving to digital based finance, whether it's CBDCs or private voluntary blockchain based stuff like we've been talking about earlier, ultimately, probably you don't need kids to know how to make change in the grand scheme of things.
My kids are heading to the coast. They're going to Portsmouth with my wife today, and two of my daughters are like, Dad, you owe me $22. Well, guess what millennial dad, because I'm 41. So millennial dad did not give, I guess my kids are Gen Alpha, or maybe it's Gen Beta. I don't know.
I stopped keeping track. I don't even know.
It's confusing. I'm old enough now that I don't know. So two of my daughters had said, well, Dad, you owe me $22. And I didn't reach into my pocket and hand them $22. But they're like, get on the Greenlight app. So there's this app called Greenlight, and you give your kids debit cards, and it's like they're just used to transferring money. So it's just literally digitally transferring money to their debit cards, and they can use it whenever they want. And so they don't know the world of cash. They do know how to use cash, but they don't know the world of cash the way you and I did. Okay, final question for you, Bob. And I really appreciate your time today. As I think about and actually, let me make one point. When it comes to AI, my take on job loss or creative destruction is, whenever we've had major innovations or technological changes like the Industrial Revolution, it has never led to less jobs. It's always led to more. And so, and this argument I feel like is always made, we're going to lose a bunch of jobs. And I actually don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to create more jobs, better jobs, and I think they're going to be better paying, and living standards are going to go up. There may be some social costs, but we'll have to deal with that as a society.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Yeah, good. Okay, so my final question for you, Bob, around more around the free market group is, I hear so much negativity about, well, the government's doing this and they're creating national debt and they're waging wars that are expensive and there's a lot of corruption and we have a devalued dollar, and there's almost like an obsessiveness around the negativity with the economy. And then I feel like, and I'm going to pick on libertarians in particular because I see this frequently, there's almost like an ignoring or a desire to not even see the other side of the equation. And so, yes, I see problems from an economic standpoint in terms of government interventionism, but I also see amazing innovations and breakthroughs like the discussion that we just had. And I feel like there's this breakdown, particularly with academics, not to pick on people, but with academics in general, where they only see the bad and they don't see like, hey, this is a dynamic situation where, sure, there's problems with a large government and there's problems with the state, but there's also significant economic advances, and it's like it doesn't exist in some ways. Do you see that as sometimes being a bit of a persistent problem? And could we maybe do a better job as people who think economically of sort of balancing out the pros and cons from an economic standpoint?
Yes, it is a problem, and I know what you mean because I get sucked into it myself sometimes. But yeah, there's particularly like just on my own personal experience and the people that I interact with, the circles I move in, that, yeah, if you're part of a group that largely is very critical of the actions of the government and, I think for quite legitimate reasons or whatever, that does, like, you feel like, oh, you have to develop a vigilance. And anytime they say something, they're lying about why they're doing it. And you got to be careful. And they're just trying to steal your money or take away your liberties and da-da-da-da. And I think that's largely accurate.
It may be true, right. But is there positive stuff on the other side?
that does breed a certain type of cynicism where you're a cranky old person. Like, you almost get the sense that, and people making dire warnings about things where they're almost rooting for the bad thing to happen so they can be right. And that it's
that's exactly what's going on.
And if disaster doesn't happen, then it's almost like, oh, well, still, you guys
wait 5 more years.
So, and you see it too, like in foreign policy as well, where if people are very much against something, the U.S. government doing something or whatever, that you could, I think, correctly give like, hey, there's all these bad things that could happen, and then if it doesn't happen, the concern is, oh, does that discredit me now? And so anyway, there's all that stuff going, in the mix there, and so I'm very cognizant of that. Also, too, there was a great example of this that Peter Thiel was interviewed by Ross Douthat recently. The clip that went viral, I don't know, did you see it, Drew? Where he was asking about
I'll look it up after.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing where Thiel goes off on stuff about the Book of Revelation or whatever. He's talking about the Antichrist, and Ross Douthat says, well, don't you worry that you're building the tools that the Antichrist will use? And Thiel's like, oh. So anyway, that was the clip that went viral for obvious reasons because it's such a provocative, juicy clip. But he said something earlier that was a really, I thought, a great point is, Douthat's I might be missaying his name wrong. I don't know how to say that guy's last name. But he's asking him all these questions, and he said, Peter Thiel said something like, yeah, Elon Musk, I forget the exact quote, but still believes that by the year, I'm making the spirit of this is right, that by the year 2040, we're going to have 10 million humanoid robots, at least. There might have even been bigger numbers. I can't remember. I think it actually was. I think he said 100 million. By the, maybe it was 2050. I don't remember. But he said in the not too distant future, we're going to have these millions and millions of these humanoid robots. And then Thiel's point was, so then why is Elon running around worried about the federal debt? That, if that part of his worldview is true, then that should have implications. Like, why does he care about, the big, beautiful bill or whatever? That's a rounding error if we're going to have 100 million new workers coming online with all these capabilities and stuff.
That's exactly my point.
So I thought that was a great thing where I don't think that, Elon is lying. I think it's just he wasn't, those two parts of his worldview, he wasn't having interact with each other. And so I definitely think, and I've been in that issue too, where I don't think I contradicted myself, but there was a period where I was very concerned about the U.S. economy crashing, because the inverted yield curve and whatnot. And when I really was convinced of the power of AI, and I started making back of the envelope calculations about the boost to U.S. productivity. And then at some point I was asking myself, do I need to pick? And so I still think there is the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds, where I do think short term we are still in store for a crash because of what the Federal Reserve has done. But I do think longer term that, productivity is going to rise. So anyway, I'm just saying that, definitely I have seen those competing trends, and that, with libertarians in particular, last thing I'll say on what you said there, Drew, me growing up in the libertarian tradition, typically what we would do is prove the naysayers wrong. They're worried about climate change. They're worried about acid rain. They're worried about overpopulation. They're worried about, one big giant monopolist taking over. And a lot of the stuff is just poo-pooing that. Just say, no, look at living standards have risen over time. Look at, women now have way more freedom than they did, in the old days, and blah, blah, blah. Just showing all the benefits of the market economy. And then that kind of flipped at some point.
I know.
And
what is that?
But I think it's not just for no good reason. Now it is true that there's a lot of big corporations that are in bed with the government, and a lot, you know what I mean? So
agreed.
And the U.S. now is certainly much more of a crony, banana state than it was, in 1985.
Sure.
So anyway, I think there are reasons, but I am cognizant of that, and that now when I see libertarians who are still more writing like the ones in, I recently had I don't know if debate's the right word, but an exchange with Nick Gillespie, because he had said something like, this is the best time in human history for human freedom. And I said, that's weird, because my cousin I do Bible studies with, we're wondering, like, is the book of Revelation right now? Like, it's so the disconnect there.
Yeah.
And so he and I had a thing, like, just trying to flesh all that out. And my last thing I'll say on that is, Drew, I was saying, to me, it's like looking at the world of the movie The Matrix, where they had a bunch of cool technology, but on the other hand, it wasn't a pretty vision. And so, like, you can blend both. You can think that there's, rising technology and innovation and human productivity is going to go up, but also if there are large malevolent institutional forces at work, it's not obvious, how that plays out.
Yeah, the circle of utopian to dystopian might kind of come around to the same place at a certain point. Bob, thank you so much for your time. I know I kept you on a long time, but you just have so much thoughtful information, so appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Drew. Always a pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this content and you're looking for a wealth advisor, or if you're a financial advisor and you're looking to make the jump to the independent side, please message me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at drew.benson@bensonwealthmgt.com, or lastly, you can call my office at 603-316-2544. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Benson Wealth Management and True North Wealth Management Group are not registered broker-dealers, and they are independent of Raymond James Financial Services. The foregoing information has been obtained from sources considered to be reliable, but we do not guarantee that it is accurate or complete. It is not a statement of all available data necessary for making an investment decision, and it does not constitute a recommendation. Any opinions are those of myself and not necessarily those of Raymond James. Expressions of opinion are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Investing involves risks, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected.